So let's start putting the edge back together here. And remember, you have your little retainer gizmo here. So that's going to go right on there like such, and then you got your gizmo here. The edge faces inward towards the neck, and it's like that because if you look at the gizmo like this, if you look at the block like this, you can see it's angled a little bit there at the top. That's to keep some retention on the claw of the spring there, to make sure it's not going to flop on out. So yeah, and you'll see that as you're putting yours back together. So this is actually a little difficult here to keep all of these lined up, and I usually just start it with with one or two of the screws just to get them lined up right. There we go. Make sure you do this step first, because the only way you can get to these screws is by having everything else off of it. I'm sure there's some official torque setting for this, but it's not going to matter, not for what we're doing. So now that you got them all in there and lined up, now we'll wrench them down nice and good here. Oh, also I wanted to point out, one of the fine tuners actually did come out all the way. Usually they do not come out all the way, because if you look on the bottom of them here, they actually gnarl up the end of it there, so it actually can't go the rest of the way out. I mean, it can, but you got to put a lot of pressure on it, and you got to really try. But I wanted to do that to show people, and I'm not sure if it's going to show up on the video here, to show people that there is no rust in the insert hole right there. I'm not sure if you can see that on there. But yeah, so I was just seeing if any of them would come out, and they did, but let's hope this goes right back in. It should. You just got to be careful with it when you're detuning it. Yeah, it's going right back in just fine. So that's alright. Alright, so again, we're keeping all the saddles in order. And all the screws have pretty much dried off from the de-rusting spray there, the PB blaster. They don't really dry off, it's just the fumes evaporate off of them here. So using our 2mm Allen head here, these will just go in, and typically the low E here is going to be all the way back. There's going to be the screw hole all the way back, but the saddle is going to be furthest forward. It's going to be pretty standard on these things. I can pretty much eyeball the intonation on Ibanez edges these days. So we're just getting it snug there. We're not making it super tight. This still might actually need to scoot around a little bit to line up with the fine tuning screw and / locking screw here. Let's get that in there. Actually, I'm going to go with the shortest one in the E string here, since again this saddle is the one that's going to be farthest back. So I'm going to intentionally use the shorter tuning locking screw here. And it's going right on in, no problem. So now that this is in here, put the screw in here, or the block. When you're putting the block back in, make sure that the hole is lower down in the block. You can see, let's let this focus in here. You can see the hole is not center. You can see it's a little off. Make sure the hole is farther down. It's going to be, boy, not having those bottom pieces in here, the bottom plates going across, is going to mess with the height a little bit here. So I'm going to dump this upside down. Let the block fall back out there. Ordinarily, you want the divot there to be farther down, but I don't see that being possible with this particular one. I'm going to sort of drop it in, and then I'm going to dump it upside down a little bit so it rests a little bit on my finger, and then I'm going to screw it down and let the screw find that hole on its own. And yes, it did. That's the perfect spot to do it right there. All right. Yeah, because what you want is on the screw that goes in there, you see it's not all the way threaded. You see the end of it there is supposed to line up with the hole with the divot in the block there. So that's what it rides up against. Alright, let's get the A string in there. And typically on the edge trims, the row of screw holes farther back is really only used for the low E there. The rest of them you're going to want all along this first tier instead of the second tier there. And make sure when you're putting these in that little washer's in there and up against the saddle and not the base plate. And yeah, a good way to judge it is this E is going to be the second tier of screw holes, inserts, and it's just going to be all the way up against it, and then the others are going to be a little bit ahead of it there. The high E is going to be just about at the edge of there. The end of the saddle will be almost, but not quite at the edge right there. Typically and then everything else will just kind of fall in between. Typically the A and the G will be roughly in the same spot, and the D and the B will be roughly in the same spot. And again, we're not wrenching these down too hard at this point. We're just getting them into rough position here. If you wrench them down too hard, it's going to shift them over a little bit there, and then they won't line up with the other screw quite right. Alright, remember there were a couple of these that looked like they were a little cross-threaded. I'm going to make sure they're going to go in alright. Yeah, that one's going in alright. Here's another one that looked cross-threaded. Get that into the D string. It's not really going in all that right. I don't like the way that feels. But it will go in far enough to lock that block down. Oh, we might have our culprit here. It might be this G-string saddle that's a little off. Let me try screwing one of these cross-threaded looking ones into there. Yeah, if I remember right, the shorter one looked a little cross-threaded too. Let me unscrew these a little bit here on the saddles just to Make sure we're getting things lined up quite right. Boy, I don't know. I don't like the way that feels, but I don't have much of a choice here, because I don't have another set of screws for these. Yeah, this other one's going right in just fine. Maybe I can find another saddle that wants to have a cross-threaded one in there. That one's working just fine. And that one's working just fine. So yeah, I'm just going to have to force this other one down. Not a big fan of that, but I don't think I have much choice here. Alright, now let's just lock these down a little bit more. I'm not putting too much pressure on them, just getting them a smudge bit more than finger tight. And then same thing with the intonation screws. And then on the other end here, make sure to get our springs back on and in order. And a little block here that goes across it. Alright, we have our cleaned up and finished up edge tremolo. It's going to go to Craigslist and possibly eBay.